And in this session, we're going to talk a little bit about Perusal, a little bit of background. We've had access to Hypothesis for the last couple of years, but that originally, the first year, we got free access to it first as part of a free trial, and then it was extended because of the pandemic. And this year we have paid for it, but it's been on a semester to semester basis. And there's no guarantee that that will continue. I've been using Hypothesis as long as it's been available here, as well as using it in a different form earlier. And Perusal offers many of the same features with a somewhat different structure, but it has a couple of advantages. And one of those is that it's free. And it also does a little bit of automated grading. I suppose the main difference in practice is that Hypothesis is designed to annotate material that's stored either in Blackboard, if you're using it from within Blackboard, or out on the open web. And it's primarily focused on text type material. And it doesn't actually store the content on its servers. It's basically just storing the annotations with internal links to that document. Perusal was developed at Harvard by a group involving Eric Mazur and several other people who want to build a similar system, but they constructed it a little bit differently. All the content that students access in Perusal is stored within Perusal. And that's actually one of the reasons why it's been available for free, because they're actually working with textbook publishers to essentially take a cut out of textbook sales. So if you're using a textbook that's part of the catalog in Perusal, students can buy the textbook from Perusal, and it's delivered to them from within the Perusal environment. And that does quite a bit of work in terms of tracking students' reading, their level of engagement. It gives students the ability to annotate the textbooks, to ask questions, to have discussions within the documents and so forth. But it's not limited to textbooks that are provided through the store. You can also link to podcasts, you could link to videos, and you could have students essentially annotate a podcast or a video by just pausing in the timeline and leaving annotations. And then other students can see those annotations on the timeline and they can respond to them. It also has very similar capabilities and a fairly similar interface, actually, if you want to annotate a PDF document or a website. But again, the difference here is if you choose a website, Perusal will grab an image of that, and that's what's annotated rather than the annotations being tied to the actual web page. In some ways, there's an advantage to that, because if the web page changes after you've assigned it as a Hypothesis document, those annotations would no longer work in the same way, or if the page disappears. This way, there's an image made of it, and students would have access to a frozen image of it, which in some ways may be more appropriate for many types of class use. So it's a really nicely designed system. It's not used quite as widely as a Hypothesis, but it's growing in adoptions much more rapidly. Vanderbilt had moved to it about 2 years ago, and they have a fairly large share of their faculty using it, which is where I first really heard about it the most. So if you could log into Blackboard and then go on community groups, and I just created a couple of simple Perusal assignments there, and choose a CELT community group. And there's two places where this will show up. One is if you go to content, this was set up actually partly to support a workshop, and that was on the TILT, the podcast discussion group activity for the TILT assignment. And I created a link to assignment that actually involved listening to podcasts that, I don't know if anyone actually did this. I didn't check the statistics on it, but I can do that now, I think. But if you go there and click on it, what you should see, it'll be a little bit different from my side, but it should take you into a, things are a little bit messy apparently, because I've created a couple of assignments in my own classes in this, and I have to link to this to merge accounts. So let's see how that works. Sorry about that. This worked when I did it earlier, but I think it's because I created some additional assignments. Okay, I'm going to try that again. And now if I click on it, this is what it will look like from the instructor side. And And this is actually the podcast that I linked to. It was one on the, well, if we start playing it, it should show me. The Think UDL podcast. So students can listen to it. It looks like either no one played it. Right now, the two of us are in it. You can see the two icons there. But if you go to any place on the timeline, if you listen to it, you could then add a comment. So I'll just type a sample comment here and click submit. And then anyone who's seeing it, you should see that mark now on the timeline. So you see that little purple dot there. And that's basically what it would look like if you're listening to an audio file, or if you want to have students annotate an audio file, or it would be a very similar interface for video. Did that work for you?
I don't see your purple dot in my view. Maybe if I reload it.
Maybe if you refresh.
Oh, now I see it. Yep.
Okay, yeah, because it would have been the initial frame. So students can then see it. And again, this becomes now a possible discussion. So if you go to that point, you should see that comment on a little tab on the right that'll pop open, and then you could add to a comment there. There we go. So that way you could embed discussions. You could even, if you want to have students discuss a video or an audio file or podcast, you could put in starter prompts and ask students to discuss specific issues in it. And then that would be the basis for the, for that particular assignment. And I could see it from the student view, but I have to log back out. But it works pretty well, I think, or at least from my experience here, it's been working pretty well just with my limited experimentation. The other case where there's an assignment was one that I just put together, which may have been part of the issue. I went to the bottom, and there's a Perusal workshop one where I uploaded a paper, a study of people who've been using Perusal and measuring the results. I haven't actually read through the paper. I just posted it a few minutes ago. But now what will happen is this is another assignment where there's actually a text document. And when you open it, and it should look similar from your perspective, when you open it, you should be, just like hypothesis, you should be able to flag a block of text and then add a comment on it. And then all the annotations would be linked to that particular portion of the document. And students would then be able to respond to it. You can change the color and the background color. And when I've used hypothesis, students have played with that a little bit. You do have some emojis. You can include a code snippet. Interesting. I haven't looked at that before. I'm not sure what type of, I assume it would be HTML code, but I may be wrong. Images, links, you could insert a video response, or you could make this anonymous to other students. So if you wanted to leave a comment that was anonymous, that if you wanted to say something that you were afraid to leave your name on, you could do that. So students would have that option. I don't see a LaTeX option in here. There is an
I see one that's squared.
Which one?
The X squared.
Oh yeah, okay. And you could insert LaTeX. Okay, so this has a very similar interface to hypothesis. So if you've used hypothesis, this would be very similar. And then you just write, you could do, let's say beta sub 2, for example, if you want a beta 2, and it displays it as you're writing it. And there you go. Oops. Well, let me submit it and see how it looks. There, okay. So it does display the code, the actual display for the LaTeX. So you do have LaTeX capabilities. It's not a student would have to know LaTeX to be able to do that, but if you wanted them to do it for specific applications, it's something you could give them a handout on. So that's the basics of it. But now it probably would be better to just to show how this works. And if one option is, if you want to, you could try doing it in one of your courses. Just create a folder that you won't necessarily share with students that you could delete later if you don't decide to use it, or take one of your older courses and do it. And I'll
Yeah.
do something similar. I'll just try creating a new assignment. Okay. And what you would do to create a Perusal assignment is you go to the folder where you want it, and you would scroll down until you see Perusal. And then you would click on Perusal, and that will create a new assignment here. And I'll give it a name. Let me find another article that we're going to use as a basis for this. So I'm going to go over to Google Scholar. And I'm going to find something on social annotation, just to keep with the theme. And I'm going to grab a PDF. Well, here's a literature review. It's a bit old. Let's just find something a little more recent. Well, I'm not going to actually go through much detail here. I'm just going to grab this and download it to my download folder. It's Adams Wilson. Okay, so now I have the document I want students to be reading, and I go back here, and I will just, oh, I should have grabbed the name. Let me grab the name. Of that, so I'm going to go back to create Perusal, paste that in, and then just click submit, and this is going to create a link to Perusal here. And then I am going to edit it by clicking on that link, which now loads Perusal. And now I am going to first, I would add the document to the library. So I go to library and I click, you have the options of adding a Perusal book if you want to assign readings, and you could either have the whole book or specific pages of it for that specific assignment if you're breaking up into modules. You could take a snapshot of a web page. You could directly load things from Dropbox, or in this case, I'm going to grab documents from my course. And you also have podcasts and videos, and you could add whole folders and things and so forth. And you could also allow students to upload content directly if you want to use that as a basis for some shared work. So I am going to go for documents from my device. I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and there it is. And I'm going to open that. It's going to take just a second to load it in. Well, it's going to take a few seconds to load it in. And you can log off during this process. We're not going to do that though. It didn't seem to take as long when I wasn't doing a workshop. Maybe this document is a little longer. I didn't check the page count.
That's okay. I'm going through the tour anyway right now because I haven't opened Perusal before. So it's
there is a really
going
nice
sort of
tour, and there's a
walkthrough
lot
of
of
each
nice
feature.
tutorial materials out on the web from Perusal. That's right. And you do have to set up your account, choose your discipline, and so forth. And while this is loading, there's a lot of things you could do with it. You could do it as something as simple as uploading, readings or assignments. You could do something at a really low scale and just put a syllabus up there and let students annotate it, ask questions, and so on. If you have any tutorial information, any web pages or other things that that you've created or that other people have created that provide basic review materials, you could post them and let students read through them and then annotate them and raise questions and so forth. If you create video lectures, this is something that a number of people did at FIT when they introduced VoiceThread. faculty would essentially do their lectures and post them online for more of a flipped environment, or if they were teaching online, they do that and then let students raise questions in the middle of it, and then the instructor could go back in and see where the questions are and respond to those. And we're almost
One thing
there.
I always wondered about in Hypothesis that maybe is the same, if I want them to do multiple assignments from the same single document, is there a way to separate the pages? Like
I think what
say
you would
this
have to-
assignment is for like, pages 1 to 10, or do I need to always upload a fraction of the document each time?
I think probably the easiest way would be to upload a fraction of the document each time. But the other thing you could do is just upload the document with different names, because otherwise if you upload it and you create it and store it under the same name, any future annotation of that would be in the same document. So
Right.
I'd probably just split it up.
But if they're using a textbook from the catalog, for example, then that's not really an option. And so there must be a way to say this assignment is based on this chapter.
So when we select this, we can now go to create an assignment. And why am I not seeing this? Let me refresh this to see. There should be a third one. Let me go to the library and select this and assign this. Okay, so this is, I just uploaded the document. Now I'm going to assign it, and this would be for this document. What you have the option of doing
I see range to assign.
You can do that. And so with a book, you could just connect, once it's in the library, you could have one chapter in one course module, another chapter in another, and then students who connect to it through Perusal would have only that specific reading for that specific assignment. So you can break it up into smaller chunks and mix and match things. Or, you could take things from one resource and then things from another resource and use them together rather than being constrained to just use one set of readings. And see here, because this was a well-structured PDF, it already has section heads and subheads, so you could even assign just those. I'm just going to assign all the content, and then I can go to the next step and give it a name. And this is reading 2. What would I do? I've been doing that a lot. Where'd the name go? Let me go back to the next step. There we go. Reading 2, and let me just say reading 2 assignment, which is what I meant to do. I guess it was okay. And then you would put instructions for what students are asked to do. It could just be read and provide comments on this document. You could put in more details. You could describe how it's going to be evaluated. And if you use a name, make sure it has a unique name so that you don't always have, module readings or something like that. So you use something that's somewhat unique. No content is selected. I thought I did. Let me go back to the previous step. I guess I didn't click on assign all comment. There we go. Okay, so now that has created this assignment, which would now be available through that link within that folder. And a really interesting thing that I haven't played with all that much, but you have a gradebook here which will display students grading, and see, we've done some work on this already. It does some automated grading, and I haven't really played with it, but you can change how the grading is done. And if you go to the gradebook, it's under settings, I believe. Yeah, under settings, if you go to scoring, these are the default settings. 60% of the grade is determined by just accessing the content, actually reading it or listening to it, opening the assignment component of it. I'm not quite sure how that differs. The reading component is 20 and so forth. And you notice it's 60, 80, 100, 110, 130, 150%. But I think it caps to 100%. So as it says here, the scoring time, and these are the defaults, I haven't changed them. They add up to more than 100, which gives students multiple ways to earn full credit, which could be, I assume, by the time they spend reading. It could be by adding comments. It could be by having other people respond to their comments, or it could be by upvoting components that other people have posted there. Or you could use, apparently this is a holistic approach. You could use the annotation content only, and then it will base it just on the annotations. And I'm not sure exactly how it's done. You can override it and you can change this. So if we go back to the holistic recommended way, you should be able to, well, here's the annotation component. If you want to make that less, you can just slide the slider over. And then it shows you where the full credit would be reached. And, you could require them to do all those things, or more than all the available options, if you wanted to. And again, and this describes what each component is. This is each time the student opens the assignment before the deadline. So that way, if they go back and participate more later, or at least open it again to see what other people have said, this is how much of the proportion of the document the student reads. So for just opening a video, though, or an audio file, will give them full credit, even if they don't listen to the whole thing. But for the text, you can require how much. So you could require them to read the whole thing. It looks like. Is that?
Yeah.
Well, it's a percentage.
No, that's how much of the whole
yeah.
credit. That means they could get 100% of their grade just by reading it without annotating it.
But let's see if there's an option for how much is required. No, there's no additional setting. So, so they have to access each page or section of the document, which could be by just scrolling through the document, to be fair. So
yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if they would game this a lot, but maybe it doesn't matter.
Well, but here it's saying, yeah, I know. At least they've opened it, which is something we don't always see when we look at
that
the
would be an
statistics.
improvement.
But here's the, and this component is actively engaging, which would be the comments. And the annotation part is what really encourages the actual the reading of the document. Now, I've noticed in classes where with some of the students who are not quite as engaged in the capstone course, where I've used hypothesis quite a bit, a lot of the annotations for those students show up in the first couple of pages of the document, and then they disappear. While, the students who are really engaged and really interested will annotate all of it. And, I only required a certain number of annotations. I think I required 3 or 4 annotations in each of 3 documents for the capstone course. But what I was finding is some students were posting like 30 or 40 annotations, and then they come back and they leave comments on the others, which is far more than I ever saw students participate in discussion forums where they were supposed to read something and comment. So, you can change it, and let's see what the components are in terms of the scoring options. Here we go. For each minute they spend actively reading. So it would be the amount of time they spend annotating, I assume, or engaging or opening those things. So there is some adjustment, and you could require more of that and put a larger weight on that if it's something you want. But the fact that this is all automated is kind of nice. I don't know how well it would work in practice, and it could easily be gamed, but it does take a little bit of the work off the instructor. So, and students do all their work through this interface, but again, it's in Blackboard. To them, it looks like just another component of Blackboard. They don't have to do much in terms of creating. They don't have to create accounts. It's all handled through Blackboard. So what I'd like to have people do is just try this. Where we stand right now is we have hypothesis through June. The first 6 months of the year. Whether it continues will depend on 2 things. One is whether Oswego chooses to fund it. It's being funded by CTS right now. It costs $2,000 a year, which isn't really a lot for the amount of use it's got. We had thousands of annotations last year. We had, actually, do I have somewhere in here? I have a link to it, but I'm not quite sure where it is. Well, in any case, we had, I think, about we've been averaging probably 10 to 15 classes a semester. And each student is making hundreds of annotations each semester. Some students have made thousands of them. So it's been used really, really heavily. But we might lose that funding because budgets are going to be tight. We don't know what it's going to be like. The governor has promised more funding. We'll see whether the legislature follows through, and we'll see whether some of that comes back to Oswego, because we don't know how that would be allocated should the funding actually arrive. The other thing, though, the other bit of uncertainty is with the new DLE, the new distance learning environment. We don't know what SUNY's going to allow. There's a very good chance that they will allow a social annotation platform, but we don't know which one it will be. We're one of only, I think, 3 schools in SUNY that have been using Hypothesis, and the other schools are just going through their free beta testing this year. And I don't think there's any SUNY schools using Perusal. It may be easier to sell SUNY on Perusal, given that it's free, although I think if it's done at scale, there is some type of a system cost, but it is less expensive than Hypothesis. So we'll see. There's no guarantee we will have Hypothesis or Perusal, but if a few people use it and it works well, it would be easy to sell it both to our administration to continue it or to push for its continuance, and maybe to sell it to SUNY as a whole as a tool that'll be allowed for all SUNY, because they do want to move to one platform for every tool so that students won't be faced with different interfaces for accessing videos. It'll probably either be Panopto or that other platform that we use that I never remember because I never found it quite as easy to use. But right now we have 2 video platforms at Oswego, and most of SUNY uses one or the other, and many campuses also use both, but they want only one to make it simpler for students, for faculty, and for support, and also to keep costs lower so that they can negotiate bulk rates or discounted rates for the entire system, rather than each campus being negotiating at a much smaller scale.
I'll say from what I've seen, I think I prefer Perusal because the issue with textbooks is really sort of a deal breaker for some courses. I mean, if there's a textbook that they could be using that I want them to annotate, there was one in my history of math course where I ended up scanning a lot of it myself, and then they were terrible scans. I mean, the OCR was not great and I didn't fix it. And I think probably I scanned a larger percentage than I really should have. And it was just so much awkwardness that could have been avoided. And I want the students to pay for their books. I mean, it's not that I support pirating all these materials, but that wasn't an option that existed in Hypothesis.
Right. Yeah, it's not really designed for that, especially with scanning, especially with math, because the equations just don't come over that easily. And then you have, that gets messy. And let me see what's in. Let's go back and let's just try creating another assignment. This is just a demo, just to see what books are out there. I know it's a growing number of books and there's a few publishers in there, but let's just say, let's just try book just to see.
I thought when I looked at it in the past too, there was some link that said, if you need another book, contact us. We may be able to get that in there, because I assume most publishers are happy to be selling their book to people who want to buy it, right?
Yeah, it's one more platform, and they already have them in digital formats because that's how they distribute them themselves. Plus, they're required to do that for accessibility purposes anyway, when there's a request for that. So let's try math. What would you like to look at?
If they have history of math history. I don't know if that's there. It's not alphabetized, I see.
No, it's not. Well, history and philosophy. There we go. And there we go. There are these books. And you as present from a mathematician.
Only 8 results per page.
Well, let's see. We can go to 48 results per page. And there we go. So there's some. It's not a very
Well, I
Well,
don't know. It looks like they might have a lot. I can't tell how far it goes.
but again, it could be requested, and, if
It
you
looks
do
like
it
they
enough
actually
in
have
advance.
quite a lot there.
Mhm.
And I guess my other question is, what is the pricing of these books?
My impression is they're about the same price as the publisher price, but
Because then do the students have any access to the book afterwards, right? If you buy a digital book or something, often you can still access it.
that's a good question. I don't know. Let's just take a look. Well, that's just me. My guess is they might not. They just purchase it through Perusal. It's probably very much like doing it from the LMS, I may be
Mm.
wrong. Is there a Perusal app?
I don't know.
Because I know with some of the providers, I forgot the name of it, but there was one provider that provided e-text. It was at Indiana University. There was an app that students could use, and they would have, while they would lose access through the LMS, they would still have access to the books over an extended period. And they negotiated where students had, I think, at least access to it for 4 years, although I think some publishers only allowed it for a couple of years, but it did give students the ability to at least hold on to their content for some time. That's something I don't know. But it looks like within the course, it's only done with, it's only available through the course management system, which generally ends right when the semester ends. So
Actually,
students would,
I clicked on one of these and it says perpetual online access, whatever
Okay.
that means.
okay,
Just when I was browsing the books, if you actually click through to one of them.
well, that's good. Let's just see what it says. How do I access this from outside? Oh, you go to Perusal and you log on. So
That's good.
students would have access to anything they purchase in
Mhm.
Perusal as long as the license works. So it would depend probably on the arrangement they have with them, but that would be really nice to let students get.
Mhm.
That was something I know when we first started talking about digital access, we were hoping was more common. It tended
Mhm.
not to be with most publishers, but. So, and as long as they can log in to Perusal in general, they should be able to access anything that has a license that extends beyond the semester,
Mhm.
which would also be good if students have to retake a course if they're using the same instructor. Okay. And they'd also have to keep the same email address. So as long as they're a student, and if they, as an alumni, they request that it be kept, or they respond to those emails asking if they want to keep their account active, they should still have it. There's probably a way of changing that, but at least it would give them that while they're here. So from what I've seen of it, I'm pretty impressed. It's got some additional tools that go beyond Hypothesis.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
it
don't
was,
see anything that it is lacking that Hypothesis has.
yeah, in terms of the LMS version of it, it seems to have more features than Hypothesis.
Mhm.
Outside of the LMS, Hypothesis has, all those, the sharing and the annotation and the social aspects of it more broadly. But within the LMS, I think Perusal does at least as well. And it, the ability to do it also with videos and and so forth, videos and audio files is kind of nice, because I have had some discussion forums where students would read a video, watch a video and then discuss it. But the ability to do it within the course is even nicer. And one of the things it asks you when you create a course is how many students you have. And then it will automatically break students up into groups of 20 to keep the annotations manageable, which is something that you have to manually do in Hypothesis using the groups tool within the LMS, at least as far as I'm aware. So I like it from what I've seen so far.
I like it
So,
too.
so all I can say is, if you'd like to try it, play with it. You know, you could use it for one thing, two things. If you can find a book that works with it, that's wonderful. And I hope we get to keep it. So,
Yeah.
but again, the more, if it's just one or two of us using it, it may be kind of hard to keep it. But if we do get a number of people who really like it, it'd be a whole lot easier to make a case.
But that's based on using it this spring semester?
Probably, because what happened, I was glad I was able to get this installed last semester, sometime in the middle of the semester, I believe. But I was really glad to get it there, because what happened is about 4 weeks ago, the SUNY system, the people running the new digital learning environment, not distance learning, digital learning
I knew what you
environment,
meant.
sent a request to all the campuses asking what tools they had integrated. And
so it was on the list.
I am hoping it was on the list, because they're both integrated into our LMS. As long as Kathy Dutton put it there and submitted that, then it's at least listed as a tool that is currently being used, which may make it easier to keep it on the list. If it's not there now, they want to make the initial installation as simple and clean cut with as few tools as they possibly can. So I'm hoping we keep one of them. So, and other two, the pricing of Perusal, the fact that it integrates with textbooks, and the fact that it does more media types is a pretty strong selling point. So that's all I've got. You know, I haven't played with it very much yet, other than just to experiment with setting up a class, setting up assignments, and setting it up so that it could have been used with that podcast discussion group. But I could see it being used as a basis of discussions, and I'm not sure about the automatic grading. You could simplify it and just have it a grade assigned based on. You could put it in a grade column that's hidden, that has a weight of 0, so you don't have to use grades with it. But if you wanted to, you could, and it could be just a small share for just doing the reading. It could be 5% of the grade, or 2%, or whatever. So it looks pretty flexible.
I'll see if I can find a way to fit it into one of my spring classes at the last minute.
Good. And I'm going to use it for at least something in one of my classes. If I can make all my PDFs a little bit more accessible. My PDFs were created in LaTeX, and there's some things that I still have to modify to get them to work better. I might put because I wrote the book that I'm using in the class, I might be able to use it for my econometrics class, which would be an interesting test.
What I'd like to use it for is as a replacement for discussion forums, but I think that might require more work from me upfront. I like to ask the students in my statistics and society honor class to find a few articles of some sort, like media type articles, blog posts related to the course content that they post in the discussion forum and discuss just over the course of the semester. And I think the discussion would go better with Perusal, but I think they would then have to email me the link to the article probably. I don't know if there's a way for the students to start a discussion of an item that then gets graded.
Yeah, it might be. I mean,
Maybe,
because there is that option to create a folder that students can upload to. And if students can create their own assignments within it, they might have that Perusal interface where you could do a discussion in. That might be worth experimenting, or at least trying.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, that was right. Well, it's too late now, I think, because, well, no, we didn't assign anything to this,
We
did we?
didn't assign anything.
So one of the options there is we go to assignment. It was a reading two assignment, I think. Edit. Yeah. No, that's not it. Where was it? No, I guess that's not it. I think I'd have to create a new assignment in order to do it.
Mhm.
Well, add assignment. Let's just do that. So I'm going to add another, I'll add another part to the assignment, whatever that is. And the content to assign, it still has to be in the library. So I'm going to cancel that. So what I would have to do is go to the library and look at a student upload folder.
Mm,
And we'll give this a name of student upload folder.
Where that was in the library.
It was in the library. So you first put things in
Student
the
upload
library and then
folder.
use them as the basis for the assignments.
Okay. Oh, that's
So,
great. Yeah, then that if it shows which student did it, I assume it must show who.
I would hope so. And so I've created that library thing, but let me create a new assignment to do that. Let me go back to Blackboard. Let me close. Well, I guess I can leave those open. I'm going to create another Perusal assignment and let's just see. Okay, and this would be student uploads. And I'm going to click submit. And then I'll click on it to get into Perusal. And we're going to create an assignment. And it's going to use the student upload folder. Oops.
Okay.
Student
Yeah,
upload
that's great.
folder. And why is it not?
There's
letting
not,
me-
is there anything in the student upload folder? Did you put something
No.
there? So I
Well,
think,
because you want to create it so that students can upload it. I'm not quite sure how to
right.
do this part.
I think I think there will still be a step where you have to assign the assignment, but the content will be in the folder there. So let's
could be.
say
Oh, yeah.
I put something
Yeah,
in your
that's true.
folder.
So you'd probably have to create an assignment and then that would link to that somehow.
Yeah, but that's okay. Still having them put it in the folder would streamline the process from me having to go to whatever website they linked and figure out, oh, can I even access this or is it behind a paywall or yeah. So
And a couple of other fun things I noticed about this is you can add extended deadlines for students who have excuses. So you don't have to extend it for everyone. You can just add the names of the students and that's automatically pulled in from the LMS. Another thing is there's a confusion report, which is because there's not enough assignments here, but basically you can look at the student comments for the assignment to see how much confusion there was where students are raising questions about things in the assignment. And that looked kind of interesting. Again, because I haven't used this in class, it's hard to see, but then you can also get analytics on students in terms of the grade distribution, the annotation submission time heat map to see when they're doing it. My guess is it's going to be in the 3 hours before the deadlines typically, but you could get reports of the number of page views and the number of, and a student activity report by student, which are nice features that we don't always get with these types of things. And that's as far as I've gotten so far.
Looks good.
Okay, any other things questions, suggestions, or thoughts on this?
No, I think that's a good start.
Okay, I'm kind of excited about it. I
mean, cautiously excited because it may go away before I really get to use it. I'd like to use it in the fall, but I'll do something in the
We've
spring.
had a lot of that the last couple of years. And the same is true with the free clickers, but we can still use them. It's just in the future, students may have to pay. But we do what we can and we keep pushing for things that make things easier.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good seeing you.
Thank you. Yep. Good seeing you too.
Bye.
Bye.